Her left shoe was still by the door. That's what broke me in the end. Not the lies, not the betrayal, not even the sound of him breathing in our bed. It was that one shoe, a soft beige slipper, half tucked under the bench like she'd slipped out of it in a hurry, meaning to come back for it. But she never did, and I never picked it up. 3 months ago, that slipper was the last thing I saw before walking out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even leave a note. I just stepped over it and vanished into a world where her name didn't exist anymore. She's been trying to find me ever since. But I'm not lost. I'm free. That night had the sound of endings in it. You know that feeling? When the walls hold their breath and the wind won't move. That's what the house felt like. It was too quiet, like even the light bulbs didn't want to blink. And the worst part? She didn't know I was there. I come back early, unannounced. I walked into my own home and paused in the hallway, hearing a voice I didn't recognize coming from upstairs, low, smug, and horribly comfortable. His laugh echoed off our bathroom tiles like he owned the place. Then I heard hers. That laugh. The one she used to save just for me. It wasn't rage that took me over. It was clarity. I stood in the dark for a while. I didn't go up. I didn't make a sound. I could hear their feet shuffling above me. I could hear her calling him sweetheart. I don't even remember walking out. I do remember the stars, though. They looked different that night, like they were watching me quietly say goodbye. Here's the part that would have confused her if I'd let her see it. I didn't explode. I didn't collapse. I didn't tell anyone. I simply turned myself off like a lamp, like a man who had already died weeks ago but forgot to leave the room. She had told me once that I was too gentle to ever do anything dramatic. So I didn't. I made disappearing look boring. She didn't notice for days. Not really. She thought I was sulking, maybe taking space. But when the groceries stopped showing up, when the bills went unpaid, when the dog started scratching at a door that never opened again, that's when it hit her. The silence wasn't temporary. It was total. I watched it unfold from far away. I saw the post go up. If anyone hears from my husband, please message me directly. This isn't like him. Then came the regret-drenched voicemails. Ellis, I messed up. Please just answer. I don't care where you are. I just want to hear your voice. I listened to every single one, quietly, from a little borrowed trailer parked in the shadow of an old apple orchard in Oregon, a place where no one knows my name and the wind doesn't ask questions. I live among old trees now, trees that shed their leaves without drama and still survive the cold. Unlike her, she's wilting in the noise of her own guilt. She's unraveling publicly, frantically. I heard she even called my mother. She's never called my mother before. But none of that will matter when she finds out who he really is. Because that man, he wasn't just a stranger. He was a time bomb. And she lit the fuse herself. The thing about disappearing is, it only works if you stay gone. 3 weeks into my silence, I saw him. The man from the house. The man whose voice I'd heard upstairs. The man who laughed like my bedroom was his. But this time, he wasn't inside my home. He was standing across from me in the produce aisle of a grocery store 200 miles away. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did. Hard to say. He wore the same smug look, like he was used to people looking away first. But I didn't move. I watched him pick out avocados with surgical focus, dressed in a dark coat with no ring. He hummed softly to himself, that same low tone I'd heard through the floorboards. It made my skin crawl. I should have walked away. But I followed him, not to confront him. Not yet. I just needed to know who he was. And what I found out changed everything. He wasn't just some guy. His name was Grant Holloway. And according to a few local news blurbs buried deep online, he was already married. 2 kids. Lives in a well-kept house on the edge of a different town. Works in pharmaceutical sales. Coaches Little League. A real community guy. Smiles a lot in pictures. The kind of man who seems so ordinary, it becomes suspicious. What rattled me most wasn't that he was cheating too. It was the timing. According to the timestamps I dug up, he met my wife before she even admitted she hated our marriage. There were social media tags from a mutual charity event 7 months before our intimacy fell apart. In one photo, they're in the background, not touching, but leaning in just a little too far. That subtle body language that says, "This isn't the first time we've spoken." That was before she stopped touching me entirely. Before she started buying new underwear she never wore around me. before she said she was going to therapy, but always came home without any insight. And then there was the email. I only got it because she accidentally left her old iCloud account logged in on a laptop she thought I never used. Subject: So tonight then? From grant.holloway@redshorepharma.com to marybell.mcrae@gmail.com. I told her I'm working late. Again, that makes 3 times this week. If she ever finds out, it's over. I'm getting sloppy, Belle. We need to be more careful. But God, I can't stop. If she ever finds out. That one line made my stomach twist. Because it wasn't about me. It was about his wife. They were both lying. To each other. To us. To themselves. I sat alone in that trailer that night, staring at the glow of the screen, not even blinking. Outside, it was pouring rain. Inside, I didn't feel anything. Not hate. Not betrayal. Just absence. Like someone had cut out all the sound from my life and replaced it with static. And then, for the first time in my entire life, I felt something I never expected. Power. Not the loud, angry kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you know a truth that someone else is terrified you'll speak. I could feel it settling inside me like a second spine. I wasn't just the one who disappeared anymore. I was the one who knew everything. A week later, I made the first move. Not to her. Not to him. To his wife. I wrote a letter. No return address. No signature. Just a manila envelope with a single photo inside. Mary Bell and Grant walking out of a motel 2 towns over. I followed them once, just once, camera in hand. They didn't even look around. She kissed him beside the car like no one existed but them. I dropped the envelope in a blue mailbox in a neighborhood I'd never returned to. 3 days later, everything changed. Grant's name was wiped off the company website. His Facebook went dark. Someone on Reddit posted about a man being escorted out of a Little League game mid-inning. There were rumors of domestic issues. Divorce lawyers. But the most satisfying thing? Mary Bell didn't know I had anything to do with it. She's still messaging people. Still posting on Reddit threads with throwaway accounts, asking things like, can someone disappear without dying? And how do you find someone who doesn't want to be found? She's asking the right questions, but she'll never like the answers. Because part of her still believes I left because I was weak, that I couldn't handle the truth. But that's not why I vanished. I vanished because the truth gave me clarity and silence gave me control. I hadn't heard her voice in 38 days. That's how long it had been since I disappeared. And yet, somehow it found me. Not in person, not through a call, but in an envelope that smelled faintly like her perfume. The one she only wore when she wanted something. The moment I saw the handwriting, my hands went cold. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the wooden table for hours beside a half-drunk cup of gas station coffee. The envelope had no return address, but I knew. I knew it was her. I didn't know how she found the mailbox. It wasn't my real name. It wasn't a place she'd ever visited. But somehow, she had tracked it down, or someone had done it for her. I opened the letter just past midnight, when the wind outside had started to whistle through the cracks in the window frame. Ellis, if you're reading this, that means you're alive. And if you're alive, I need you to know I'm not. Not really. I walked through the days like a ghost, replaying the moment you left, or rather, didn't even say goodbye. The quiet has swallowed me whole. I don't sleep. I don't eat. I barely move. Grant is gone. His wife showed up at my door. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just handed me the photo with your initials on the back and said, "He knows everything. You were always the better one. I just didn't see it until I broke you. No apology. No explanation. Just guilt disguised as a confession." I wanted to rip the letter in half, but something told me not to. I folded it back up, placed it in a drawer under a stack of road maps, and sat in silence for nearly an hour. The next morning, there was another envelope. Same paper. Same perfume. No address. No stumps. But this one wasn't from her. This one was from someone else. It arrived in a plain manila envelope, addressed only to E. No handwriting. Just typed text and a return label from a tiny town in Utah. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper and a photo. I looked at the photo first and felt the blood drain from my face. It was a shot of myself, sitting on the porch of the trailer, taken from a distance. Blurry, but unmistakably me. The note read, "You're not the only one watching. You think you disappeared. You didn't. I froze. Someone had been following me, tracking me. They knew I was alive. But who? Not Maribel. She didn't have that kind of reach. Not Grant. His life had just been blown to pieces. Someone else. Someone in the shadows of all this. Someone I hadn't accounted for. I spent the rest of the day combing through everything. I checked the locks, the fields around the trailer, even drove into town and circled the post office. Nothing. No one out of place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unraveling. Not just Hermie. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the photo. Who took it? Why send it now? I sat on the floor with the image in my lap, flashlight on low, the wind outside howling like it knew something I didn't. And that's when I noticed it. In the corner of the photo, reflected faintly in the window behind me, a shape. A silhouette. Like someone had been standing right behind the camera. Right behind the glass. Closer than I ever realized. Whoever it was, they wanted me to know I wasn't safe. Not truly. Not anymore. I had wanted to escape a marriage. To escape betrayal. But it turns out, I may have walked straight into something worse. 3 days passed. No more envelopes. No more messages. Just silence again, but this time it didn't feel like mine. It felt borrowed. Stolen. Like something else was holding its breath, waiting for me to move first. Then came a phone call. Not to me. To her. I still had access to our old phone records through the shared carrier dashboard. I hadn't bothered checking it in weeks, not since the night I fled. But something about that shadow in the photograph had shaken something loose in me. That primitive feeling that someone was circling the perimeter. When I checked the records, I saw a new number. An unfamiliar area code. Called her twice in one day. Once in the morning, then again just after midnight. The call lasted 22 minutes. No boy themade. Curious, I checked the number. It was flagged. A burner. Registered under a fake name. I shouldn't have been able to find it, but someone had once taught me how to pull metadata from incoming signals. A trick I learned when my buddy was going through his own messy divorce years ago. I used that same trick and tracked the call's origin. It came from a small medical clinic in a rural part of Nevada. One with no website, no reviews, no listed staff. Just a name that sounded almost made up. Red Cedar Behavioral Intake. The word behavioral caught me off guard. Was she seeing a therapist? A crisis counselor? Or something else? I clicked through the digital footprint of the place. Buried in a PDF uploaded over a year ago, accidentally, I assume, I found the name G. Holloway listed as an off-site emergency contact for a patient intake form. Grant. Hello. And directly beneath that, her name, Maribel A. McRae, admitted twice. Once before I left. Once after. The second admission was marked. Involuntary hold. Duration, 72 hours. Reason, patient reported feeling stalked, unsafe in own home. Believes subject has access to personal devices. That's when everything stopped making sense. I wasn't stalking her. I hadn't been near her since the night I vanished. I hadn't sent her anything. I hadn't spoken a word to her. But someone else had. And they weren't just watching me now. They were watching her too. I couldn't stop shaking. What kind of web had I stumbled into? Was it Grant? No, he was exposed, crumbling, buried in the fallout of his double life. His wife had filed for divorce. His job terminated him without ceremony. A local gossip blog had even picked up the story, speculating he'd been cheating on multiple women, not just Maribel. So who had something to gain by keeping this chaos alive? Later that evening, I left the trailer and drove into town. There was a small, underused library that let locals access public records without much oversight. I scanned through anything I could find on the clinic. Nothing criminal, but strange inconsistencies. The address had changed 3 times in 2 years. Ownership bounced between shell companies. And 2 former employees had filed complaints about unauthorized visitors during after-hours shifts. That night, as I walked back through the orchard path toward my trailer, I saw something that stopped me cold. A new mark on my doorframe. Small, barely visible. But there, a clean, shallow X carved into the wood. Not old. Fresh. Made with something sharp. Someone had been at my door. Not knocking. Marking. A chill ran through me that didn't fade, even when I locked every window and sat awake with a flashlight until morning. I stared at that mark for hours. What did it mean? A warning? A message? A countdown? The next morning, I checked my email from the library again. A single unread message had slipped past my filters. No subject. No sender. Just one sentence. She wasn't the only one being watched. Attached to it was a photo. It wasn't of me, or her, or Grant. It was of my mother, sitting on her porch, watering the flowers she always fussed over. It had been taken from the street. Angled. Professional. Precise. I don't remember walking out of the library. I don't remember driving. I just remember my hands gripping the wheel tighter than I ever had before. This wasn't about a broken marriage anymore. This was about control. And secrets. And someone who was willing to destroy anything I loved to keep theirs hidden. There are people you swear you'll never call again. People whose names feel like burns in your mouth. Whose numbers you delete not just from your phone, but from memory. And then life forces you to say them again, out loud, like a curse you thought you buried. For me, that name was Wesley Brandt. He wasn't a friend. Not really. More like a ghost from my early 20s, the kind of man who always had a knife hidden behind his smile. We'd met during one of the worst years of my life, back when I was working graveyard shifts at a shipping yard and sleeping in a basement apartment with no windows. He had been the kind of guy who knew everything about everyone, but never let you know anything about him. He'd saved me once. Or maybe I owed him. I still don't know which. But when I saw the photo of my mother taken by a stranger and received the email that confirmed we were both being watched, I knew I couldn't handle this on my own anymore. The police wouldn't help. What would I even tell them? That I left my wife and someone started sending me pictures like they were directing a horror film? No. I needed someone who understood how the darker parts of the world actually worked. I dug up Wesley's name from a printed contact sheet I'd kept in a locked file buried beneath an old heater panel. I drove an hour to the nearest town with a payphone and made the call. One ring, then silence, then his voice. Ellis, took you long enough. No hello. No, how have you been? Just like that, I was back inside his strange world, a place where small talk was a waste of time and paranoia was standard operating procedure. I need help, I said. You're already past that, he replied. You wouldn't have called me unless things were bleeding. We met that night in a diner that hadn't changed since 1982. The waitress didn't ask questions, just poured coffee and disappeared. Wesley looked older, grayer, but his eyes were the same, unreadable, distant. He wore a black windbreaker and kept his phone turned off, wrapped in foil. Paranoia wasn't a habit for him. It was a religion. I slid the photo across the table. My mother on the porch. The mark on my doorframe. The email. I told him everything except one thing. I never said Maribel's name. I didn't want him tracing it back to her. Not yet. He stared at the image in silence. Then he said something I didn't expect. This isn't random. Someone wants you aware. Not scared. Not gone. Present. They need your attention, but only just enough to keep you close. Why? I asked. Because whatever this is, you were never meant to leave it. And the fact that you did? That makes you a liability. I laughed, short, bitter. All I did was leave a broken marriage. Wesley shook his head slowly. You left something else too. You just don't remember it yet. His words hit like ice water. He wasn't being cryptic for effect. He genuinely believed there was something I'd forgotten. Something critical. Something dangerous. Then he said something that changed everything. Do you remember a man named Kellen Avery? The name meant nothing. At least, not immediately. But Wesley saw the flicker in my expression. That split-second delay when your mind trips over something half-buried. Early 2020. You and your wife were at a fundraiser. Small event. Local arts council. I know, because I was hired to monitor someone there. You shook hands with a man wearing a navy suit and a copper tie. That was Kellen. I shook my head, confused. So, he went missing 2 weeks after that. And not the kind of missing where someone files a report. The kind where his name was wiped from a database. Quiet. Clean. He was tied to something federal. Possibly medical. I stared at him. Are you saying I had something to do with that? I'm saying your wife might have. That sentence hollowed me out. Wesley slid another file across the table. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Travel records, receipts under her maiden name, a second post office box I didn't know existed. One entry caught my eye. Wire transfer. Red Cedar Behavioral Intake, $4,000. From M. A. McRae. Date, 2 days before I left. What the hell is this? I asked, my voice dry. She paid them, Ellis. Not for herself. For someone else. Maybe for you. I pushed away from the booth, heart hammering. You're saying she was setting me up? Wesley didn't answer. He just leaned forward and whispered, do not go back to that house. Whatever was happening in your marriage, it wasn't just an affair. It was a cover. And someone's finally realized you're still alive. I hadn't planned on breaking into anything. That's not who I am. I'm not reckless. I'm not brave. I'm just a man who left because his wife broke his world in two. But when Wesley showed me the wire transfer linked to Red Cedar Behavioral Intake, the place that never returned calls, never published staff photos, never answered emails, something snapped inside me. For $1,000 sent by Mary Bell to a facility that supposedly held her under a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric watch, none of it lined up. And deep down, I no longer believed that stay was for her. It was for me. Or at least, it was meant to be. Wesley made the arrangements. He always did. He found a quiet route through back roads and a contact who knew the overnight maintenance schedule. I arrived at 2:07 a.m. wearing a janitor's uniform with a fake Red Cedar badge clipped to my chest. My heart was pounding, but the front security desk didn't even look up as I walked in carrying a mop bucket and a roll of floor towels. The interior of Red Cedar was eerily sterile. Too quiet, too white, too polished. It didn't feel like a behavioral clinic. It felt like a movie set of one. The halls were empty, but cameras watched everything. I kept my head down and moved like I belonged. Past room 104, past the holding wing, past the stairwell marked no access. Level B. That was where I stopped. Level B wasn't on the brochure I'd pulled from the building's lobby. In fact, it wasn't on any fire escape maps at all. But it was real. A keypad-locked steel door at the end of a short hallway, blinking softly like it hadn't been opened in a while. I used the key card Wesley gave me. It buzzed once, then unlocked. The stairs down felt endless. Concrete steps curving deeper than any two-floor building had a right to descend. It smelled damp, metallic, like blood scrubbed too many times with bleach. At the bottom was a single hallway. Unmarked doors. No lights. Just the soft hum of electricity somewhere overhead. I chose the third door. It opened without resistance. No look. Inside was a small, windowless room with a desk, a chair, and a wall of file cabinets. At first, I thought I'd made a mistake, that this was just storage. But then I opened the top drawer of the cabinet marked expired. The first file was labeled Ellis MCRA. I froze. My fingers wouldn't move. When I finally opened it, I saw something that didn't make sense. A patient intake form dated 5 months ago, 2 weeks before I disappeared. Signed by a woman listed as emergency guardian, Mary Bell A. McRae. Reason for commitment, dissociative disorder, paranoid tendencies, abandonment behavior. Recommended action, long-term hold. There were session notes too, logs, transcripts, dozens of pages detailing conversations I never had, comments about my refusal to eat, my resistance to treatment, and most chilling of all, patient attempted escape during last monitored visit. Sedation applied. Subject continues to express delusional belief that he is being watched. I couldn't breathe. None of it was true. It was a paper trail, forged, built, rehearsed. Someone had written me into a story I never lived. They had planned to erase me, to lock me in a padded version of my own life, and convince the world I had lost my mind. And the person who authorized it, her name was right there in bold print. Mary Bell McRae, spouse. She had tried to have me committed. I stumbled out of that room like I'd been shot. I barely made it back up the stairs without vomiting. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder now. Every security camera felt like it was following me with new urgency. I kept walking, past the nurse's station, past the exit, back into the night. Once I was outside, I didn't stop driving. For hours. I made it back to the orchard just before dawn. But the moment I stepped out of the truck, I knew something else was wrong. The door of my trailer was wide open. I drew closer, heart racing, fists clenched. Inside, nothing was missing. But everything had been moved. Slightly. Just enough to notice. My maps were stacked backwards. The bathroom light had been left on. I always turn it off. And worst of all, taped to the inside of my refrigerator was another photo. Not of me, not my mother, but of Maribel standing at a gas station, pale, hands shaking, staring over her shoulder like someone was following her. On the back, in blocky black marker, "We warned you. Stay gone." There was only one other person alive who had ever seen through Maribel's facade, and I had cut him out of my life 7 years ago. My brother, Jonah McRae, was 3 years younger than me and 10 times as loud. We hadn't spoken since the night of my wedding. He'd pulled me aside, just minutes before the vows, and said something I never forgave him for. "You don't really know her." At the time, I thought he was being petty, bitter. He'd always been the rebellious one, always pushing back at anything stable or structured. I thought he hated the idea that I was settling down, that I'd found something he couldn't touch. So I told him to leave. He did, and I never looked back. But now, with Maribel's lies collapsing into something far more sinister than adultery, with false commitment records, planted documents, forged mental health claims, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that Jonah had seen it all coming. So I drove to his last known address, a rundown warehouse that he'd converted into a studio apartment outside Flagstaff. The place hadn't changed much, still covered in anti-authority murals, the front doorbell broken and taped over with a post-it that read, "Not dead, just hiding." He opened the door with a sigh, like he'd been expecting me for months. "You took long enough," he muttered. We didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. He poured us both cheap gas station coffee, then sat across from me on a stool with chip paint. He looked rougher than I remembered, gray stubble, dark under eyes, a fresh scar along the side of his neck that I didn't ask about. When I finally showed him the forged documents from Red Cedar, he didn't react, just tapped the folder with one finger. "I told you," he said. "She was always 2 steps ahead. That woman knows how to build walls out of air. Why didn't you ever tell me more? Would you have listened?" he snapped. "You were in love with the idea of her, not the reality." I saw it that night. She looked me dead in the eye and said I should be careful what I share about the McRae family. You think that was a joke? That was a warning. I felt the heat rise in my throat. "Why didn't you ever say that before?" "I did," he said quietly. "You just didn't want to hear it." He got up, paced once, then walked to a locked metal cabinet in the corner of the room. When he opened it, I saw a pile of files, photographs, and USB drives. "After your wedding," he said, "I started digging, because something about her didn't sit right." "The name she gave you?" "Not her first. Maribel used to go by Ariel Carson. She changed it in 2013, right before she met you." He handed me a stack of papers. There were court documents, sealed family records from New Jersey, a mental health evaluation from her early 20s, a restraining order filed by a former employer, a second one by a former roommate, and beneath it all, a still image from a grainy surveillance tape, time-stamped 7 years ago. Maribel standing in a stairwell, clutching a phone. Behind her, a man unconscious on the floor. "She said it was self-defense," Jonah muttered. "The charges vanished. But everything about the case was buried. I think someone helped her make it disappear." I stared at the image, trying to process what it meant. This wasn't just a manipulative woman. This was someone who had been covering tracks long before she ever met me. "She tried to erase me," I said, "to get me institutionalized, disappear me on paper." Jonah didn't look surprised. "Yeah, that's her pattern. Remove the threat, rebuild the story, start over somewhere new." I felt something twist in my chest. "So what happens now?" He leaned in, serious. Now we stop running. We expose her. But first, we need to find out who's protecting her. Because this isn't just her anymore. Someone's pulling strings." Then he handed me a second USB drive. There's a name that keeps showing up in these old records. One that never made sense. I thought it was a typo. I plugged it into my laptop. The files opened slowly. Surveillance logs, call records, correspondence between an unknown lawyer and someone called him A. McRae, client alias Ava. But there, in the metadata of one redacted file, was a name. Dr. Emery Greaves. Affiliation, Red Cedar Behavioral Intake. Title, Behavioral Programming Director, retired. Programming. I asked aloud, "What does that even mean?" Jonah just looked at me with dead seriousness. "It means," he said, "this wasn't just about cheating. It wasn't even about control. It was about seeing how far someone could push a person emotionally, legally, psychologically, until they either cracked or vanished. And then my phone buzzed. I hadn't used it in weeks. The signal had been dead. But now, suddenly, a single text came through. From an unknown number. You were supposed to stay gone. Now we'll both vanish. Attached was a live photo of Jonah and me, sitting inside his studio just seconds earlier, taken through the window, from outside. The moment I saw the photo, Jonah and me, captured from outside his studio window, I knew we were out of time. Jonah moved faster than I'd ever seen him. He grabbed the hard drives, the folder of names, and tossed them into a steel briefcase, locking it tight. I shoved the laptop into my duffel and didn't bother to close it. We were out the door in under a minute. Outside, there was no car, no sound, just a faint smell of engine oil and warm asphalt. Whoever had taken the photo was already gone, but they had wanted us to know we were being watched, not for intimidation, for pressure. This was the final squeeze, the last warning. We hadn't just pulled on a thread. We had started to unravel something woven far too deep. Over the next 2 days, we moved like shadows. Jonah brought us to a contact in Tucson who specialized in legal shielding, a retired investigator who helped us verify everything. Dr. Emery Greaves had, in fact, been tied to a series of ethically questionable rehabilitation programs in the early 2000s. He was quietly retired, but still consulted off the record with private institutions like Red Cedar. One of his last clients? Maribel. She'd been listed as a referral contact for 3 individuals who had been placed under behavioral observation without court orders. One of them, a man named William Brandt, was reported deceased in 2017, but there was no death certificate, no obituary, just a one-line entry. Status: unresponsive. Family notified. Jonah said it best. She didn't want you gone. She wanted you rewritten. But what they didn't expect, what Maribel never saw coming, was that I would leave quietly instead of falling into the trap. I was never supposed to vanish. I was supposed to scream, react, break. They built the narrative for that. I simply walked out of it instead. And now, it was time to write the ending on my own terms. I sent the file to 5 places, a federal investigator, 2 reporters, a private attorney who owed Jonah a favor, and Maribel herself. Along with it, I attached a note. Simple. Unmistakable. I remember everything now. So do others. I don't want revenge. Just distance. You won't hear from me again, but you'll never erase me. That same night, I turned off my phone for good. The burner number she'd used to reach me before went dead. I wiped my digital trace with Wesley's help, boxed up the files, and locked them away in a safe Jonah buried beneath a property he owned under a fake name. We didn't need to broadcast what we knew. We just needed to let them know we existed. And then something strange happened. She stopped searching for me. No more emails. No more posts. No more desperate messages to old friends. It was like she understood. The game was over. Whatever power she thought she had dissolved the moment, I proved I didn't need to yell to be heard. Silence had always been my strength. 2 months later, I stood on a cliffside in Oregon with Jonah beside me. He handed me a beer. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He was family again. And for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere that had nothing to do with someone else's lies. The breeze was cold but honest. The sky was open. The weight on my chest was gone. I didn't win anything, but I didn't lose myself either. That was enough. Today, I live in a small town where nobody knows my name. I work with my hands again. I fix things. I build furniture for a living. People come in, they smile, they leave. I don't check the news. I don't chase closure. I already have it. And the slipper? The one she left by the door the day I walked away? I buried it under an oak tree behind my workshop. Not out of hate, not even out of memory, but as a marker that I was once in a place I wasn't meant to stay. And I left. Not with a bang. Not with revenge. Just peace. That's something no one can take from me ever again.